All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hey, everybody. It is the Mark Thompson Show. Yay! Mark is off today, but we have a great interview coming up with Karherine Stewart. She is the author of a new book talking about how America got in the place we are and how we get out of it. That is coming up in the next 10 minutes. Of course, Michael Shure will be on the show, journalist and political analyst. We have a lot to talk about with him, and Michael Snyder, the culture blaster, as well. But right now, I am joined by Matt, our newest member of the Mark Thompson Show. Hi, Matt.
Hi.
Matt, you come from radio background, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because we've introduced you, but we don't know a lot about you. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I worked in morning radio at Sirius for a while, and now with iHeart. Variety of topics and different things.
Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot of stories for you today, including what you want to do if you've just had a baby is head to the Social Security office, right? What they're doing in Maine. Yeah, I guess it's not okay anymore for you to register your child at the hospital. You've got to pack up your infant in the car carrier, and you've got to head on down to the Social Security office. That is the new way. That's what Trump wants us to do. So this is for the fine people of Maine, where it's even worse because it's snowy and cold in Maine. Their Social Security contracts have been canceled that allowed Maine parents to sign up their newborns for Social Security at the hospital. And so the acting commissioner of Social Security, Leland Dudek, said, I recently directed Social Security employees to end 2 contracts which affected the good people of Maine. He said, in retrospect, I realize ending these contracts created an undue burden on the people of Maine, which was not the intent. For that, I apologize and have directed the contracts be reinstated. But for now, yeah, not very good forethought in the Trump administration. So, yeah, I guess you've got to go schlep that kid off to the Social Security office. What a bummer. I saw some super chats and super stickers come in. I want to say thank you to people who have contributed to the show already. As a matter of fact, RJ Dunn with $20. It's Friday. It is. And we have some gators in Friday Fabulous Florida. So be prepared. They are coming your way. Of course, this is a crowdfunded show. You can find us at themarkthompsonshow.com. It is themarkthompsonshow.com. That's where you'll find the Patreon links and the PayPal links as well. Thank you to everyone who makes this amazing show possible. We really do appreciate your help. Some other stories that I wanted to throw your way before we get to Karherine Stewart and Mark Thompson today. One of them was another tariff threat. So yesterday we saw, and it's been this back and forth, bouncing back and forth with tariffs. Like, are there tariffs? Are there not tariffs? What's going to happen with tariffs? We just don't know. Well, now, yesterday, the tariffs were supposed to kick in this week, and Trump said, well, on some items now we'll back off, right? For automakers, we'll back off until April. For other things, I think it's avocados from Mexico, televisions, air conditioners, other things that were covered by the U.S. Mexico-Canada Free Trade Treaty. That's called the USMCA, which Trump had signed in his last term in office. Those things, those will give you a break on, right? Now today, we're back with more threats. New threats, new tariffs on Canada, including a 250% tax on dairy. So from day to day, we don't know what the tariff situation is going to be. That is creating volatility in the markets. And if Trump wants a good economy, I don't necessarily know that this is the way to go about it. So just after yesterday, as Trump was easing off of tariffs, today he's threatening these new tariffs on Canadian lumber, and on dairy products. And we know with the tariffs on Canadian lumber, Trump has said, hey, we've got our own trees to cut down. And so he's relaxed protections on forests here in the United States so that we can use our own beautiful resources and chop them all down. We don't need your wood, we've got our own. Trump said today, Canada has been ripping us off for years on lumber and on dairy products. He said Canada has a roughly 250% tariff on U.S. dairy exports to the country. And so he said America will match those tariffs dollar for dollar. He said we may do it as early as today, or we may wait until Monday or Tuesday. We're going to charge the same thing. He said it's not fair. It's never been fair, and they have treated our farmers badly. So here we go. We don't know when it's coming. Could be today, could be tomorrow, could be Monday, could be Tuesday. I realize these are all negotiating tactics. And the reason he keeps threatening to put them into place on a certain day and then backing off is because there's a flurry of phone calls. And so we're all in limbo. We're in this tariff limbo. And I guess this is the way it will be until they capitulate to Trump's whims, or I don't know what. We'll talk a little bit more about it with Michael Shure when he arrives very, very soon. Another thing that I wanted to bring up with Michael Shure is Europe telling Pete Hegseth that they're doing what America wanted them to do. That by spending more on defense, that's what America wanted. John Healey met with Pete Hegseth. Did I say Pig Hegseth? Oh, my bad. Pete Hegseth in Europe. And he said, listen, you wanted us to step up, so that's what we're doing. John Healey is the British Defense Secretary. And he says that now Europe and the United Kingdom will be taking a lead role on defense and in supporting Ukraine, just as the United States has demanded. I think that's a great tactic, because Trump has said it's America paying for everything. Everyone else needs to step up. But I don't think that's what Trump really meant. What Trump really meant is we're going to pivot and support Russia. So it's a great way, though, for Europe to continue to support Ukraine and not really ruffle Trump's feathers by saying, you want to support Russia? We're going to support Ukraine. By just saying, hey, this is what you wanted us to do. This is what we will do. There's another piece of this pie when you talk about Ukraine. There are some secret meetings going on. At least 4 senior members of Donald Trump's entourage, according to Politico, have held some secret talks with some of Vladimir Zelensky's political opponents. They talked to the former prime minister. They talked to the most recent president of Ukraine, who would love nothing more, I guess, than to slip right back in. They talked to senior members of the party. And apparently the discussions center on whether or not Ukraine can hold very quick presidential elections. Are they trying to oust Vladimir Zelensky? Is that what's happening? It looks like it. When you're holding secret talks with his former opponents and asking whether there can be a quick presidential election, and we know they've said he needs to step down. Is this nation building? Is that what we're in the process of seeing? Make it how we want it, not how the people of Ukraine want it. The presidential elections in Ukraine are being denied because they're under martial law. They're at war. So at this point, you can't have a presidential election. They also say that holding a presidential election right now could play right into Russia's hands. There are a lot of voters that are serving and fighting on the front lines. So, and also people, of course, as in any wartime, are frustrated, and there's war fatigue. And so doing this, is it fair to Zelensky when this country is thrust into war? We'll talk to Michael Shure about that as well. Right now, though, I want to play this for you because Mark Thompson sat down with Karherine Stewart. She is an amazing author and has a lot of really good things to say. And it's a pertinent conversation because one of the things, no matter what news you hear every single day, is how in the world is this America? How in the world is this happening? What can we do to make this better? And that's really the thrust of the conversation between Mark Thompson and Karherine Stewart. So let's get right to this interview that Mark has done with her. And they talk about her new book. We'll put a link to that in the chat in case you're interested. The first time she came out with doing interviews with this book, that book sold out. So now I believe it's available again, but check it out. The interview with Karherine Stewart and Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yes, it is a pleasure to have an author on board who may have written the piece that synthesizes everything going on in America, sort of how we got here to this place in America. She's an award-winning journalist, and you'll see in our conversation the super well-researched aspects to this book, her latest. She has shed light on the rising influence of religious nationalism in American society. She's done critically acclaimed books prior to this, The Power Worshippers, Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism. She did The Good News Club, The Christian Right's Stealth Assault on America's Children, and these begin and continue conversations around these themes, and her latest book brings a lot of these themes together. It's called Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. How about it for Karherine Stewart? Karherine Stewart, welcome, welcome. Wow, there is so much here. You organize this book really well, and you tell these stories really well, and there's a first-person aspect to this book as well. I wonder if we can get into the ways in which you sort of broken things up, you know, the money, lies, and the God. We'll start with something, if it's okay with you, that I think people are aware of, but the interests that go into each one of these things, the money, the lies, and the God, and this is a surprise to me. I mean, I kind of maybe think I was aware of the sort of disparate nature of a lot of these interests that come together, but how they sort of compete even within these overall efforts was an interesting thing. But in any case, let's start with the disinformation, because I think we all are kind of loosely aware of what that is. But you give it a sort of clarity that I've never seen before. Speak to the disinformation campaign, and maybe, you know, if you have to, you can weave these other things too as well. Obviously, they all come together. That's what your book is all about.
That's right. And thanks for the question. So they all do come together. I titled my book Money, Lies, and God because, first, money is a huge part of the story, meaning that huge concentrations of wealth at the top of the economic ladder, the tippy top, really have destabilized the political system in interesting ways. Lies or conscious disinformation is another really huge feature of this movement. A lot of the funders of this movement are actually funding disinformation operations. And number three, God, because the most important ideological framework for the largest part of this movement is Christian nationalism. And they work together, really. So, I pay a huge amount of attention to the funders. Some of them are motivated by, just simply protecting their privileges, and they're typically informed by some kind of libertarian ideology. We have another set of wealthy people driven by more overtly religious and cultural goals. We have power players who run these organizations by making serious moves toward a more authoritarian kinds of governance that, these ideas please the funders. They promote deregulatory policies and tax privileges for those at the tippy top, but they also know that they need to sort of mobilize the rank and file. how are you going to get the ordinary people on board with an agenda that's actually impoverishing them and making their lives more difficult? Well, you do that with lies. You do that with disinformation. You do it by emphasizing culture wars, including issues that have little to no relevance in their everyday lives. They just, become a huge distraction. And by the way, this is interesting to me. Sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say that you point out specific disinformation, culture war type messaging that is consciously used, is the point, to obscure the actual motives of the forces behind it. Absolutely. When you go to some of these events, I'm an investigative reporter. I've always felt like we really don't know what's going on unless we're in the room and we can hear it from like the horse's mouth, right? So I go to a lot of right-wing conferences and strategy gatherings. And when you go to those spaces, it's all culture wars all the time. Often, for a long time, it was like abortion is the greatest moral issue of our time. It's the most, same-sex marriage. We got to talk about transgender bathrooms, whatever, like these kinds of issues, some of which, of course, have much more relevance to people's lives than others. But movement leaders know if you can get people to vote on a single issue or 2 or 3 issues, you can control their vote. So they often distract people with issues related to sexuality and sex because it distracts everybody. And some of those issues make some people feel really uncomfortable. And so when you get them preoccupied with those issues, they're not looking at the economic policies that the funders want. And a lot, the term, the religious nationalism piece of it is also of critical importance, of course, because you've got this large mass of voters who need to be mobilized to support this, or frankly, authoritarian agenda. And the way you do that is through religious nationalism and the culture wars.
Well, the surprise to me through the religious nationalism part of your book was that and again, it's maybe something I was loosely aware of, but that these are all, again, such different faiths often that come together in this effort. I mean, in other words, the derailing of democracy in the service of God or some God-related goal may relate to a bunch of different gods that people have.
This is absolutely true. People often associate religious nationalism in America with white evangelicalism, but the movement draws on a number of different religious identities. By the way, the funders, religiously, they're all over the place. Some are evangelical, some are Catholic, ultra-conservative Catholic, some are Jewish, some are Protestant, some are really very atheistic, but they all agree on the need to sort of destroy what they call the administrative state and crush liberalism, because they know that that's going to serve their broader economic agenda. But the religious nationalism piece of it is really central, because for the rank and file, it's the way that they can legitimize their support for amoral and authoritarian leaders in pursuit of a radically anti-American project, even though they, wave American flags and dress up in red, white, and blue. The idea of destroying the institutions that sustain democracy and crushing democratic principles of equality and justice and rule of law. I mean, this is a radically anti-American project. So this movement has really set itself very clearly against the Constitution and America's democratic ideals. But the leaders of the movement need to square this with people who've been brought up to be patriotic, and promoting sort of Christian nationalist ideology helps them to that end.
It's interesting. It's almost like what that flag means to one person, it means something else to someone else. And then, to your point, sort of the ends justify the means. We're here to change this country and to sort of rescue the soul of this country. But let me just double back, because in your book you actually detail, of course, it is so well sourced. And you do go to the, I want to get back to that. You go to these conferences and rallies and all this stuff, and I want to get to some of those in a second. But it's interesting to me as you talk about these different forces that one of the greatest funders of Leonard Leo's project, and I've talked about Leonard Leo on this show for years. I mean, I see him as one of the he's really gotten the America he wants. It's a remarkable thing that he's done, but he's been supercharged by this donor that you mentioned in your book.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can just go through that, because that's an extraordinary way that his movement was just vaulted into relevance in a way, and dominance in a way it hadn't been prior.
That's right. Leonard Leo, as you've explained on multiple occasions, sort of as a money man for the religious right, and particularly the sort of far right legal ecosphere. He's really built up certainly the Supreme Court to where it is today, and the Federalist Society to where it is today. So he's also, sort of financed raised and spent financing for a range of related organizations in that sphere. But he recently got a huge boost by a fellow named Barry Seid, a Jewish Chicago billionaire who his motivations do not appear to be religious at all. And he, 1.6 billion with a B to create an organization called the Marble Freedom Trust. It's they can spend $230 million per year without touching the nut. And he put Leonard Leo in charge of it. So it really shows that on the funder level, it's, I think Leonard Leo, to be honest, really does have a particular religious and cultural agenda. But two things can be true at the same time. He can have this agenda and realize that, like, his, what he wants will never pass at the ballot box. So if you can take the courts, you can take over the country, right? So he can have that cultural and religious agenda, but he can also know that it is very, very good for his own lifestyle. Apparently, he's known for wearing fancy suits and enjoying fancy dinners with fine wines, and has some really lovely homes and things like that. So, two things can be true at once.
So religion and has been really, really good to him. But I mean, that's not unusual. But as you say, and also, he's vetting a lot of other big donors, and he's constantly sort of working that circuit. And so that luxury meets other luxury, I suppose. You call them the funders in your book. This is really, I was trying to figure out, and maybe you can answer it, although people maybe can draw their own conclusion. I was trying to weight the various influences in terms of, percentages. I don't know if you can do that or if you'd even want to, but boy, you do need money in America to make things happen. And the funders are really a big part of this.
That's true. I mean, a lot of people, to be honest, are going to be really hurt as they're destroying the public administration subject to ethics rules, and replace it with, who knows, Elon Musk's privately controlled corporate managed state, staffed by, I would say, incompetence.
So far, that seems to be the case. Yeah.
I know this is something that, honestly, authoritarians do. They will purge the government, the civil service, of anyone they view as insufficiently loyal, and replace it with someone whose primary qualification is loyalty. And in this way, you're just not getting the best people. I mean, it's really sad. This is also where the lies fits in. I think there's been a tremendous propaganda campaign against government within the Republican Party. And so as a consequence, who is it who said, I want to shrink the government so small it can be drowned in a bathtub? I think it was Grover Norquist. So when Americans are surveyed about the levels of waste and fraud in government, they always come back with ludicrously exaggerated estimates. But now that's not to say that waste and fraud in government agencies doesn't happen. It does. There's room for improvement always, just as there is in the private sector. But people need to be reminded of the very good things that a functioning government can achieve, and the very bad things that happen when you have a lack of functioning government, or in countries where you've got these kleptocratic and cronyistic government arrangements, or sort of inefficient or completely ineffective government.
It's interesting because one of the things that has weaponized or helped weaponize those things that they're weaponizing, this crew, this coalition, if you will, is the disparity, the gulf in economic terms of American life. There is the growing gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And so you have this roiling grievance, it would seem, maybe among the have-nots. And that meets, again, a lot of these interests that are associated with just getting tax cuts and just wanting a change that is self-serving that way. But this is an important part of success for them. I mean, for this coalition of those who put together the money, the lies, and the God, as you say it in your book.
Yes, I mean, I think the biggest, look, there are a lot of different fissures in this movement. Like, for instance, the tech bros, the sector of tech bros who are now, all on board with this stuff. Do you think they're motivated by the religious nationalism piece of it? Of course not. They just think of that as the price of doing business. They just see that as, okay, we got to placate those folks to get the tax and privileged contracts that we want. But I think the biggest disconnect has always really been the disconnect between the funders who want, who are very, very, I think, insecure and defensive. I think they have a sense that their huge wealth that they have is actually coming at the expense of a lot of the rank and file, because it is. And they're deathly afraid that, that the rank and file are going to come after, the people are going to come after them one day with proverbial pitchforks in order to sort of, say, hey, you should be paying your share of taxes. Why are you paying less taxes than a public school teacher? Things like that. So they build these sort of walls around them and justify. But on the rank and file, like, when you peel away the culture war stuff, the Christian nationalism, all of that, in general, they really want a better deal for themselves and for the workforce. These folks, I would say, the rank and file of the MAGA movement, I would say, some of them have education, some of them are on the, less educated side of things, but I wouldn't say it's the poor. I would say more it's like the middle to working classes that really support this. Their standard of living has gone down over the last 50 years, for sure, as a consequence of this sort of right-wing economic ideology that has made things better for those at the top. It's funny, this movement is always saying, well, we're, nostalgic. We want to bring things back to the good old days of the 1950s. Well, look at the tax rate, the top tax rate for people in the 1950s. It was a lot higher than it is today. And, the average CEO could actually, make 20 something times their average worker, and they could have a really nice house and a second home and a country club and a boat, whatever they wanted, nice lifestyle. Today, the average CEO of a Fortune 500 company makes in the many hundreds of times what their average worker makes. And of course, if you look at the work that's been shipped overseas, it's like much more. So we're just living in an era of enormous wealth inequality. And rather than think, gosh, maybe we should do something to help form a more perfect union, these guys are really kind of being controlled in a way by their vanity and their insecurities. And they want policies that justify these enormous concentrations of wealth.
Yeah, I mean, and you just describe it, the threat and the greed, and it all comes together. And then the blame, because what you're describing is this loss and corrosion of a middle-class lifestyle. Exactly. And who's to blame for that? And if you can blame the government and the opposition successfully, which has been done, then you can achieve power. And that's that's what I mean when I say they've weaponized this in a sense also.
Absolutely. Or if you can blame DEI,
sure,
which is whatever they think it is. It's really clear when they talk, they always cast this now in the language of merit. And are there some diversity programs that did there need to be, was there an overcorrection for some of the past injustices? Yeah, of course. In some places there might have been, but that's not how they're doing it. They're not running this sort of DEI excuse to dismantle the government because they want to actually improve things. They actually, like, when you really dig into the ideology of a lot of these folks, and I do in Money, Lies, and God, a lot of it is really kind of nutty, sort of super pseudo-libertarian. And when they talk about, they say it's merit, but it transparently is like preparation for a total war on anti-discrimination law. It's a way of putting disadvantaged communities back in their place, and it's going to serve as affirmative action for loyalist conservative white men.
Right.
It's something that's intended to make people hesitate, frankly, to hire anyone who's not from that group, because then they could be accused of making a DEI hire. Even
Yeah,
if
it's a wild reversal and you're so clever to point that out, that they can actually have legal exposure by doing this thing that is actually quite innocent.
yeah, I'm sorry.
You mentioned, just because I wanted to, it's a part of what's always been it's always been an irritant to me, the way people reflexively grab the label libertarian, like it's some, libertarian. Yeah, cool, man. You do what you want. I do what I want. I'm a libertarian. That's, of course, not what libertarianism is. And you talk about in your book the fact that they call themselves libertarians. This religious movement is oftentimes claimed as a libertarian movement. Can you just spend a second on that?
Absolutely. Well, you look at somebody like Elon Musk, who probably describes himself as a libertarian. He says, let the markets be free and we can all have our freedoms. He also, look how much he gets in government subsidies. He gets these privileged contracts. These folks want protective policies for their monopolistic businesses. So it's not really like just let the markets be free stuff. And oh, by the way, when you start bringing up personal liberties, like the liberty to say, like receive best practices medical care when you're in a hospital having a miscarriage, forget about it, or the liberty to decide if and when you want to become a parent, forget about it. The movement, the religious leaders, the sort of sergeants and the power players who are, I would say more even the sergeants who are sort of running the show, they are hell-bent on restricting the liberties of the groups in society that they think should be subordinate.
Yeah, and by the way, sergeants is an actual kind of, you talk about sergeants in your book. That's you have the breakdown, and it serves the reader well as you go on this journey. Now, I do want to get into your journey a little bit, because it's really one of the things I liked was there's sort of a first-person aspect to your book, and you went to all of these different rallies and these different coalitions of religious groups and mega churches, et cetera. This is clearly something you've been researching this book for how long? Clearly a long time.
I've been in this field for 16 years, and
Right.
Money, Lies, and God is my third book. I sort of fallen down the rabbit hole. But, I recognized right from the start, once I started researching the right-wing legal movement, and I saw how they were recasting this whole idea of freedom of religion as something rather than, pertaining to the religion clauses of the First Amendment, sort of aligning it with a free speech clause of the First Amendment, without getting into the technical weeds here, I could see that they were going to turn civil rights law on its head and say, if you're religious, you have a right to exempt yourself from all of the laws and rules in society that you don't like, but that have to pertain to everyone else. So, and I've always thought, listen, I was trained as an investigative reporter by a fellow named Wayne Barrett, who wrote the first biography of Donald Trump, which he was researching and writing when I was training with him. So I've known about that guy for years.
Yeah. So you go inside the movement. Really, you're in the belly of the beast. There's one kind of a traveling roadshow of religion and conspiracy. I'd love for you to relate a little bit of that.
Yeah. Do you know what Reawaken America is? So anybody listening who doesn't know, look it up. It's a feast. It's a certain kind of a feast. It's a traveling pro-MAGA conspiracy fest. They've set up in dozens of churches around the country. They've been doing this for since the sort of COVID crisis began. And what they do is they draw thousands of people, people who are sort of members of the rank and file. And there's every single conspiracy you can possibly imagine is in these spaces. You walk in there and you're hearing about the Great Replacement. You're hearing about how, 666 is emblazoned on the World Health Organization's doors, and they're trying to microchip you, and they want to kill us off and replace us with aliens, and JFK is still alive. It's a conspiracy, and the 2020 election was stolen, and Donald Trump is, this great savior of our nation. He's a representative of, he's a white hat fighting. Like every single crazy conspiracy. One of the Trump kids usually shows up to speak. I mean, this really shows that it's not something that's really outside the purview of Trump. It's very much the Trump world. And so thousands of people attend to each one. And I got to tell you, Mark, they're not all bad people. They're not. I mean, some of them are, I chat with people and some of them are really, relatable. They love their families. They care about their communities. They really think they're doing what's best for America. But they've been they've been subject to this barrage of lies that's confused them. And I think all those lies are intended to disorient people. You're hearing this lie and this lie and this lie, and none of them they're not all consistent. So you're just confused. You just get spun around. And then you're more primed to think, well, Donald Trump has never done anything wrong. And all the charges against him are just a deep state conspiracy. And, public schools are just places, they're just gender change factories, right. Like all this nonsense. And then before you know it, it's like, I'm going to vote for this, narcissistic sociopath with no care for the common good, who's allied with one of America's most dire enemies. I mean, it's really kind of sad.
It's a pretty dark place we end up. And I'm going to ask you in a second about, because you do finish the book with some kind of hopeful sense of strategy, maybe would be the word I would use. But I'll get to that in a minute. So before we get too bummed out, at the predicament, which is a dire one. I mean, it's a very dim kind of period in American history. I'm curious if the opposition, the Democrats, the libs, if they couldn't begin to penetrate that world that you've described on their own, or begin to build their own kind of a traveling show of competing coalitions, it is because I think last thing, and then I really do want to hear your answer, of course. It seems as though, in what I got, and this is kind of a bummer. I mean, I just kind of really sort of am depressed at the momentum that these movements within the overall movement have achieved. And your book synthesizes it. Your book puts it together, and it just looks like such a tough mountain to climb to try to defeat it. And I'm curious if there's any sort of competing program that could get the kind of momentum ultimately that would perhaps overtake the sort of momentum I just described.
I think there are efforts now. I think there's a lot of recognition now of what folks are up against, and there are efforts to sort of among a lot of the existing organizations to start working coalition. I mean, the strength of this movement is in its deep organizational infrastructure that has these different pieces, but then you have these networking organizations like the Council for National Policy or ZICLAG that really get members of the leadership on the same page, bring them together with funders. Like if you're in that world, if you have that kind of ideological, those aims, you're offered an immediate path for engagement and involvement. And the right and the left spend their money differently. The right has invested in organizations and individuals and leadership development and people, so that people, they find talented young people often who have the right ideological approach, and they invest in them so that those folks know they can secure their economic futures within the movement. And on the, I would say, moderate liberal left, you've got a much more fractious group of people who are not inclined to sort of follow authoritarian directives. So they're harder to organize. The joke is it's like herding cats. But more than that, they tend to invest their money in technocratic solutions, work in silos rather than working at cross purposes. So it's sort of, I've written my last 3 books to show how they've done it. That's why I've done it. We wouldn't want to emulate their most craven tactics, like inspiring political violence, spreading lies, demonizing the opposition, and doing that kind of thing. Like we wouldn't want to, a pro-democracy movement is implicitly upholding the values of democracy, which are equality and justice and rule of law. So we would have to do all of those things, we wouldn't want to do another January 6th thing or anything like that, which they did, launch an attack on the Capitol and try and have a coup against the US government. But here's where we can learn from what they do, that sort of thinking long term, having a fairly big tent. Like, I actually think we should stop purity testing one another. We're not all going to agree on everything, but if we can agree on
that's
more,
like a favorite Democrat pastime. You may have trouble selling that.
well, I think a lot of people are really figuring out that, like, wow, we're not doing it right. Also, I mean, they're so, the reason their movement is so successful is because much of it functions as a giant voter turnout machine. And they campaign all throughout the year rather than just at the election cycles. And they go after low propensity voters, and they really focus on turning out their base. I talk to a lot of folks, and everyone's like, how can I get my father-in-law to flip his vote? Well, you may not be able to. Still, have conversations and be a human being together, but you might not succeed in flipping his vote. So maybe you don't want to put all your energy there. Instead, go after, if you have a limited amount of energy, figure out where you're going to get the most, best chance of success. So persuading people that their vote matters, reaching out to the disenfranchised, holding people who do agree with you accountable to actually get out there on election day and vote all the way down the ballot.
Yeah, it's really true that voter turnout is really the challenge increasingly. And we talk a lot on the show about voter suppression and how that's sort of been taken to a high art. And gerrymandering is something that's been done by Democrats and Republicans. That's something else that's really undercut the people's voice. But the voter suppression techniques have become so aggressive. In my judgment, they really may have influenced the last election, but that's a conversation for another time. Let me get to the hopeful parts of, and you've kind of just hinted at one, which is that you take the playbook, essentially, is what you're saying, that they have used effectively. They've sown the seeds of activism. They've sown the seeds of political administration at very local levels. And you're right, they've seen it bloom. This is something that Jane Mayer talks about in the Dark Money book, just the fact that Koch brothers money is in high schools. It's not, it starts very early. And so let's stipulate to the fact that we do believe that we could learn something from that. What other areas of hope might there be to sort of begin to for the movement that's about democracy to actually achieve speed?
Well, first, we all need to get out of bed. I know after the election, a lot of people were like retreating, but this is not the time to do that. This is the time for moral courage. These attacks are going to have real consequences on real people, federal employees, people who use real services. We need to be able to, as people get hurt, we need to be able to say, look, those are the people who did this to you, and here are the people who are fighting for you. I also think we need to engage in our democracy in really meaningful ways. We have to remember we have elections in less than 2 years. And Donald Trump, the whole country didn't go MAGA. Donald Trump actually won by a statistically small percentage, if you look at other presidents and the percentages by which they win elections. And the challenge was that the enthusiasm for the vote was dampened on the Democratic side. So fewer people turned out to vote, and pulled the lever for the Democrats, and more people, Trump, I think, got more or less the same proportion. If you're looking at the percentage of people who are eligible to vote, as he got
the same as his last go round, you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So we really need to get out our base. We need to go after low propensity voters, and we need to start right now, like now. I think we should start, frankly, championing policies that actually involve real change. We should build a kind of movement that actually messaging that broadens beyond the professional classes and help ordinary Americans understand the issues that are going to make a difference to them, and be really important to the majority of people. I don't need to get into the details here, but life is unaffordable for a lot of people. And when that's happening, they become resentful. And then those resentments can be more easily weaponized and turned against the very same people who actually want to help them. I mean, another point I would say is, why aren't we going after these billionaires and making them pay their fair share of taxes? Why aren't we saying, you know, why aren't we saying you don't get to have all this, you know, Bigfoot over all of our politics just because you have all this money? So, you know, that's a longer.
Well, I would also say, I think the Democrats, I mean, because we're two parties, and so whatever your vibe is, independent, whatever, I get it. But I mean, if you want to have a chance to get back into power, you're going to have to vote with the Democrats. Sadly, it's, you know, you've got one or two choices. But so I would say the Democrats need to make the Republicans own the fact that they're the party of billionaires, and that I think the more that stink can be made to stick to them, the more the resentful, grievance-filled crew that you discuss in your book who have come over. I don't know that you can get them over, but you can definitely get them maybe questioning and maybe not leaving the house to vote for a Republican. That's what I would hope. Bernie Sanders does it well. You know what I mean? I think he's one of the voices that cuts through. That's why I'll tell you, Katherine, quickly, people always say, you know, we're looking for some young voices, some new young voices in the Democratic Party. I go, well, the best Democratic Party member, he caucuses with the Democrats. I understand he's technically independent, but the best voice out there for the libs is Bernie Sanders, in my view. He cuts through the noise. You may not agree, but that kind of just bald-faced truth that he lays out, and in authentic ways, I think that's what the Democrats need more of.
Well, Democrats definitely need to start investing more in leadership development. That's for sure. I mean, the right does, that's another thing the right does really well. You know, as recently at Charlie Kirk, you know who he is. He runs Turning Point USA. They do a lot of youth development. Leadership Institute reaches out and has a lot of youth development. So there are all these different ways in which they're finding young kids who sort of have the right approach and sort of shaping them and cultivating them.
I mean, Charlie Kirk was a young kid. I remember when Charlie Kirk was this little pisher that was coming up, you know, and he was just making noise. And now he's a leader of a movement, or an important part of leading a movement.
He's very much so. And he's allying himself with ultra-conservative religious leaders in order to sort of work that angle. He's allying himself with some conspiracists, professional conspiracists, it seems like. Jack Posobiec, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who famously spread the Pizzagate conspiracy and things like that. So he's all in on this. But when you go to those events and you see all those young people, very enthusiastic with all of their MAGA hats and all of their sort of USA cheers, you realize that, you know, this is something that Democrats could. I mean, now there are a lot of moderate, liberal, and progressive young people as well. I would say disproportionately more, but perhaps the right is a little bit better at getting folks engaged in politics in meaningful ways. So, for instance, when I go to a right-wing conference, the sort of exhibition hall is filled with booths. Oh, you want to get involved in public education? Here, do this here. Oh, you want to get involved in your town governance and bring biblical values? Here, do that here. Oh, this is another thing. We should definitely emphasize the importance of local activism. But no matter what your issue is within this right-wing sphere, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, if you're disabled, you have a role to play. And then, you know, this last summer, I went to the Democratic National Convention. I went to the exhibition hall. There were some really nice people selling some really nice food and people offering, you know, tours of the city. And then there was Planned Parenthood, and there were some other organizations that sort of, but you didn't get the sense that, oh, you want to get involved in the faith-based sphere, you want to get involved in somewhere in the secular sphere, you want to get involved in local politics, national, here's an organization for you. You didn't get the sense that people were there finding a path to engagement. So we need to, but the paths are out there. It's just, we've got to do a little research. It's like, I don't know, Marcus, when you buy a pair of shoes, do you do a little research? I do. I do. I mean, a lot of people ask me, what should I do? I'm like, well, do a little research, figure out what your strengths are, figure out what your, you know, values, your core values are. And there are things we can do as individuals, of course, like vote and reach out to our circles and get them to vote. But there are things we can really only do best when we join together with others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does start with you. That is to say, it starts with each one of us, but then you have to build coalitions. And that I think you lay that out so beautifully in the book. And the coalitions are, as I was saying at the beginning of this conversation, disparate, and you wouldn't necessarily put them together. You wouldn't put together a gazillionaire with somebody who is barely making it, but they both do end up on the same page running the same political play. And I love what you've detailed here, and I love that you've brought a coherence to it. I'll have a link to the book. Again, it's Money, Lies, and God: Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Karherine Stewart, you've really you've done a great job with this, and I congratulate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and thanks to everybody watching.
Of course. Thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It is the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the contributions that popped through while Mark and Karherine Stewart were talking. Lady Beatrice coming through with a super chat for $5. Thanks to certain people, our liberties are being restricted. The red flags, she writes, were there and no one listened. Make America not dumb again. Thank you, the Lady Beatrice. The super sticker from Elwin, who we love your name, Elwin, with a $10 super chat. Happy Friday, everyone. Love that. And from Harry Magnan, thanks, Mark. 2 more books to read. How to Beat the Charlie Kirks and Joe Rogans of the World. Absolutely. Speaking of it being a happy Friday, let's jump right into Friday Fabulous Florida here on the Mark Thompson Show.
It's time for Friday Fabulous Florida.
There is a gigantic alligator in my kitchen.
A look at the weirdest stories from our weirdest state.
The first one actually comes from Mark, who found this story last week, and we have to share it with you. This is about the Gainesville police arresting a man who crashed into a BMW dealership after he was denied a test drive. That's how that works. Got it. So this guy, and I don't know if we can show his mugshot. He looks like he's not sorry. I have to say that. Officials with the Gainesville Police Department and Gainesville Fire Rescue say they responded to the BMW dealership in Gainesville after the suspect, allegedly, drove the vehicle into the building after being denied a test drive. No one was hurt. The structural integrity of the building was still intact, so they didn't respond further. I think this is the next story. This is a different mugshot. This is the Gator mugshot. Officials say the suspect entered the business about 2 p.m. He went in with allegedly, according to police, with the intentions to buy an M4. There he is. Doesn't look sorry, does he? Valued at $114,000 or $110,000, but he didn't pass the credit check. Oh no. And so he didn't qualify for a test drive because he didn't pass the credit check. Apparently, they only let you drive the car if they really think you could pay for that car. So he got really upset, tried to grab the keys to the vehicle as he left the building. They didn't allow him to take the keys. He was not able to complete this transaction. So he went back into the parking lot and sat in his car before police say he circled the dealership twice, then hit the gas and ran right into the windows of the showroom. The police say when he crashed inside, he rummaged around, continued to look for the keys to that M4, but was not successful in finding them, ran by foot, was arrested by police a short time later. So there he goes. This is, a guy who just doesn't like taking no for an answer. Kevin Lehman, 20 years old. I don't know what you give that mugshot. I'm going to give it a 6, a healthy 6. I see Karen Cooper gives it a 6 as well. Yeah, sometimes. Let's move on to this house guest that left a little something behind. This happened in Graceville. A house guest overstayed the welcome. Happens sometimes, right? And apparently made matters worse when he texted the homeowner about forgetting a bag of something on the nightstand. If you guessed cocaine, you would be right. Investigators in the Florida Panhandle say this happened February 28th at a home in Graceville. The deputies were responding to a call for a subject that needed to be escorted off the property. He was trespassing at this residence again, house guest overstaying the welcome that you have to call police to get them to leave. The sheriff's office said while they were on the scene, the homeowner got a text from the suspect, helpfully informing them that he had left a baggie on the nightstand. The deputies took a look with the homeowner's consent, and sure enough, they found a plastic bag containing a substance that tested positive for cocaine. So this 50-year-old man from Tallahassee was arrested, charged with possession of cocaine, and they say, let this be a lesson. If you're going to leave something behind, maybe don't text about it. Yeah. This woman was bitten by an alligator while she was kayaking in Florida. Got her right on the elbow. Happened March 3rd in Polk County. The woman now hospitalized. She was snacked down on while kayaking at the Tiger Creek Reserve on Monday, March 3rd. She was bitten by the alligator on the elbow, sent to a nearby hospital to be treated. Her condition remains unknown, but the same day, a man was also bitten in the leg by an alligator. He wasn't seriously hurt. The person calling 911 said, we have two people that just got bitten by alligators. They say the woman's arm was really bad. They tried to move her arm to put the thing on, and they apparently she was in a lot of pain, so that's not good. They had to call out a nuisance alligator trapper to come get this gator to remove it to an area that wasn't so populated by people. So the Florida Wildlife Commission says serious injuries caused by alligators are rare in Florida. But of course, we report the serious injuries, so to us, they're pretty common, right? There have been more than 450 alligator bites on people in the state, 30 of which were fatal, according to the records from the Florida Wildlife Commission. So we have 3 stories. Let's find out which one is your favorite. We have the Gainesville man who crashed into the BMW dealership on purpose. We have the house guest that left a little something something behind. And then we have the lady who is now in some serious pain in the elbow after a gator bite. I don't know. We always have to pick a favorite. Matt, what was your favorite story of the week?
I think my favorite's got to be the gator.
Gator. Yeah, Gator's hard. Gator's really hard. I have to say I'm going to veer off of my normal Gator pick this week, and I'm going to go with the guy who overstayed his welcome to the point that they had to call the sheriff's department and then wanted his baggie of cocaine back. We'll go to the chat, see what you guys have to say. Looks like hold on. See, get it. Gator story. Yeah, we are Gator story. Absolutely. Yeah, teacher Lori says house guest stupidity plus drugs. That's right. Driving into a BMW dealership is legend, says Dan. Yeah. Gator, says Santi. Crash guy, says Harold. Cocaine dude. Coke is it. All right. I don't know. I don't know if we did our normal poll, but that, my friends, is Friday Fabulous Florida.
This has been Friday Fabulous Florida.
There is a gigantic alligator in my kitchen.
Y'all come back now here.
All right, I think we have time for a little bit of news before we jump in to a political conversation with Michael Shure. He should be along in just a couple of minutes, but right now, let's jump over to news. There's a lot of stories to talk about. This report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. I don't know, Matt, if you have the news music, but if not, that's okay, because I can go without it. No. All right, this report sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. Oh, there's the graphic. I like that. President Trump may start reciprocal tariffs as early as today. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump said it's outrageous that Canada slaps a 250% tariff on American dairy farmers. He said Canadian tariffs in response to that and others against Mexico could start today or Monday. The Trump administration is ending collective bargaining at the Transportation Security Administration, revoking union protections for thousands of airport security officers. The Department of Homeland Security claiming the move will safeguard transportation systems and keep America safe. Here's the quote. Eliminating collective bargaining removes bureaucratic hurdles that will strengthen workforce agility and enhance productivity and resiliency and jumpstart innovation. And with that, TSA agents are left without union representation. President Trump is touting the latest jobs report, interestingly, speaking from the Oval Office again. He said manufacturing jobs are returning to the United States very quickly under his leadership. He said it's a reversal from a trend under the Biden administration. The jobs report released this morning came in actually weaker than expected. It showed 151,000 jobs were created in February, which was actually less than had been expected. The FAA is requiring SpaceX to conduct an investigation after its latest failed rocket launch. Elon Musk's company launched a Starship from South Texas Thursday afternoon, but it spun out of control, exploded 8 minutes into its test flight. SpaceX had made several modifications to its huge Starship rocket after an explosion during a January test flight. There's video of that debris just raining down. It caused the closure of some airports in Florida for a time. A convicted killer is set to face a firing squad death in South Carolina. Sadly, in just a few hours, Brad Sigmund is set to be executed at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. In addition to it being the first ever in the state to being the execution by firing squad, it marks the first time that it's been done in 15 years anywhere in the United States. There are anti-death penalty groups still working to stop this execution. I think you can choose your method, right? If it's allowed in that state, they'll ask you, would you like lethal injection? Would you like death by firing squad? So it may be something the inmate chose. I'm not sure.
Hey, Kim, it just looks like your video froze. If you want to turn the camera on and off, maybe it just looks frozen here.
Am I frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen. Your audio is coming through clearly.
You can hear me, but you can't see me. Oh, okay. Well, let me continue with news, and then I'll take myself off and take myself back on. A Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the Fed is waiting for more clarity on President Trump's new policies before making a move on interest rates. Speaking at a policy forum in New York, Powell said, "We don't need to be in a hurry." He said the White House is implementing aggressive policy changes in trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. Meanwhile, we have Education Secretary Linda McMahon saying, yeah, it is true that President Trump plans to eliminate the Department of Education. She was on Fox and Friends saying Trump has made it crystal clear that he intends to make good on a campaign pledge to shut down the department with an executive order. McMahon said that the states will then take charge of schools when the federal agency goes away. To California, where former Vice President Kamala Harris is reportedly seriously considering a run for governor of California. That according to Politico, which cited two people with knowledge of a conversation Harris had last weekend. The outlet reporting Harris was asked about when she would make a decision on a possible run during a pre-Oscars party. Harris answered she'll decide by the end of the summer. The polls have shown that she leads the field of possible Democratic presidential candidates for 2028 so far. And some new numbers from the CDC show adult cigarette smoking is at the lowest level in 6 decades. Jennifer Kofer with Texas's MD Anderson Cancer Center says it's proof the education campaigns funded by tobacco taxes actually do work. They're still concerned about a spike in vaping among teens and young adults, though. The CDC says tobacco use remains the leading cause of preventable death and disease in the United States. But pretty good that it's at its lowest level in 6 decades. Don't forget, daylight savings time set to begin for most of the country this weekend. Clocks setting forward an hour beginning at 2 a.m. Sunday, March 9th, shifting 60 more minutes of daylight into the evening hours until the time moves back an hour again this fall. Fire officials say that twice-annual clock shift is a great time to test your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors and change out the batteries if they are needed. And lastly, ahead of our visit with the culture blaster, Michael Snyder, Mickey 17 is off to a great start at the box office. The film starring Robert Pattinson made $2.5 million from Thursday previews last night. It is expected to pull in between 18 and 20 million in its debut weekend. Mickey 17 expected to take first place over other films that have been in theaters like Captain America, Brave New World. And this report, I hope you can still hear me, is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. Rich and Nancy out at the vineyard just released their first ever 2021 estate grown Barbera from their brand new vineyard. And Rich says it's yummy and it's delicious. That's the brand new Barbera. Of course, you have the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red, which is my favorite. And the Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson Pinot Grigio as well? So good. If you do order at Tenuta Vineyards, make sure that you get our 10% off by using the phrase that pays. It is smash it with your iron rod. You can call, you can get the email.
With your iron
There
rod.
they smash
with
it.
your iron rod.
You can head out in person to Tenuta Vineyards if you would like, or you can call, or you can email them and get the discount that way as well. So TenutaWinery.com is the website, and the phone number is 925-699-4576. If you're emailing Rich, it's rich@TenutaVineyard.com. Again, the website, TenutaWinery.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
It is the Mark Thompson Show, and oops, I'll take that away. It is the Mark Thompson Show. Kim McAllister filling in for Mark Thompson, who will be back on Monday. And boy, do we have a lot of great guests for you on Monday. That includes, of course, our political analyst, Gary Dietrich, but also Alex Lawson will be on the show Monday. He leads a coalition of more than 340 organizations that support Social Security and Medicare. So I'm sure he has a lot to say about the future of Social Security and Medicare to us. Also, Gil Duran will be on the show, a journalist, former opinion editor for the Sacramento Bee and the San Francisco Examiner. He was, of course, press secretary for former California Governor Jerry Brown. He also led the press department for former Senator Dianne Feinstein. So Gil Duran will be on the show on Monday as well. So that is happening right now, though. I am awaiting our friend Michael Shure to come on the show, and I don't see that he's here yet. So hopefully we can send Michael Shure another link to the show. Maybe I'll do that as we are talking. And then we'll get to some of your comments, which is great time because we might not have had time if Michael Shure had come on time. So, you know, never hurts to showcase what you guys are thinking in the chat here. There it is. And I will send that off to him. And off we go. Let's see what you guys have to say. Looks like Kamala forever. Some support for Kamala Harris and a possible run for California Governor Spencer Jaffe. Some support as well. Yeah. Another comment. Oh, let's see. I have some more comments to showcase for you. Let's see what we have here. Feinstein had a Chinese spy on her staff for 10 years. That may well be the case. I don't know if that was ever proven or if the allegations were just made. CC Ryder says there was no evidence of vote flipping. Data scientists look at data, not software. Biden's cyber director issued election security report that systems were secure and that there was no voter fraud. Something we talk about a lot on this show because I think it's interesting how, because of everything that happened with the big lie and Trump, that even bringing it up is taboo, right? That you're not allowed to have the conversation or raise the possibility or look at the allegations at all. And so while we discuss that on this show sometimes because I think it's important to look at such things. Yeah, we don't know. Cece, we have no idea, right? Jose says Kamala lost by 1.3% within the margin of Russian influence. Such an unfair fight. The Democrats versus the Trump, Putin, China, and Korean billionaires. It wasn't a big win. Trump keeps saying he has this major mandate. It was not a big win. So, yeah. We'll talk more about politics now. We have Michael Shure hopping into the show. Of course, we love Michael Shure because he knows more about politics than most of us have forgotten, something like that. Michael Shure, welcome to the Mark Thompson Show. Yay, thank you.
Good to be here. I'm so sorry about the, we're trying to work on a little sound issue. My internet issue is was preventing my punctuality, Kim, so I'm sorry. But
no problem.
Let me...
yeah, that's the way it goes. I'm just glad to have you at all. And I have a bunch of things I've prepared to present to you because a lot has happened and we need to get right to it if we're going to get your sports in there as well. The first thing that I wanted to bring to you is something I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Apparently, there's a story that Trump administration officials or people in Trump's circle have reached out to former Ukrainian presidents, prime ministers, those that oppose Zelensky, and they're asking him, is it possible that you guys could mount a presidential election quickly? And right now they can't have a presidential election, and that is because they're under martial law because they're at war. Does this mean, do you think, and we've heard at least Vance say, Trump needs to step aside. Zelensky needs to step aside. Does this mean they're trying to nation build? Are they trying to get Zelensky out and put in there who they want?
I think they're also what's at play there. Yes, is the answer to a degree, because they know they can't. They can't really work. They've shown thus far they can't really work with Zelensky, and Zelensky is reluctant to work with them. But I think what if you're skeptical about it, is that Zelensky is unfavorable to Russia and to Putin. And if they can find someone who, and it may be the former president there, a woman whose name escapes me at the moment, if she were to become, let's say, the president of Ukraine, that there may be a little more ability and a little more eagerness to work with Putin, and that to the Americans is all of a sudden appealing. So there are many things at play here, and again, I've definitely not known enough to forget about Ukrainian politics, but I do know that's probably what is at play to a degree, is appeasing Putin with somebody else who might be more amenable to what he actually wants as his end game, or to be able to compromise on. And Zelensky seems uncompromising, and that's the issue that Vance and Trump and Putin and others have.
You would think that his approval numbers would be really high, Zelensky, in Ukraine, that people would be loving him because he has managed to stave off Russian aggression for this long when so many people thought that was impossible. But because people are weary of war, they call it war fatigue, right? His numbers dropping a little bit. And so if they were to mount a presidential election right now, it might play right into Russian hands. That's the thought.
Well, yeah, exactly. And again, I don't know how sophisticated Ukrainian polling is. I don't know how sophisticated Ukrainian polling in the middle of a war is. I do know that war fatigue is real, and we've seen it with leaders in war. I mean, people in America, we don't like to change horses during the war, but our presidents still often suffered depending on the popularity of the war. This is a different kind of weariness because this is happening on their streets and their buildings and their schools. Their children are growing up in a war-torn country. And so it becomes a little bit different. So it would stand to reason, though, that any kind of appeasement or anything that could be sold as the Russian preference, I think would help Zelensky if his opponent is seen that way, because there is such vitriol against Russia right now from most Ukrainians.
The fear, I think, from many Americans is that the world order is changing and that the United States seems to be now aligning with Russia and against Europe. Europe is now increasing defense spending, and the one of the, I think it's the UK defense secretary told Pete Hegseth, listen, we're just doing what you asked us to do. You want us to step up? You want us to spend more money on defense? That's what we're doing. Is it going to be us against Europe now?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it would be. I mean, I think there's a bit of aggression and a bit of opportunity for Europe here. The great power that the United States has been traditionally in terms of brokering these sorts of things, and also, you know, galvanizing other nations to be partners in either war or peace. I think you're seeing that fray here with some of our biggest partners, mostly because of what happened in the Oval Office, that sort of the ambush of Vladimir Zelensky. And so I think it's an opportunity for Europe to be world leader here and a united Europe. Look, you know, Starner and Merz in Germany are new, but Macron is kind of leading the charge, and they're going along. At least Starner is for now. And also you have Canada, not to be forgotten or excluded, but they are a big democracy, and while not European, they are part of the English Commonwealth, and they do participate in these conversations, and they have a bone to pick with Trump as well. So there's, you know, what Trump has done by saying America first and isolating in this way has really brought together some of these other countries. So I don't know if it's us against them or them against us, but it's certainly they have taken charge on supporting Ukraine. They had done it before, and they're furthering their investment.
Let's come back home and talk a little bit about what's happening with the Democrats. And I think we have video of this, where Tim Walz was asked, who is the leader of the Democratic Party?
The leader of the Democratic Party is right now?
I think the voting public right now is what I would say. And I keep telling that we're not going to have a charismatic leader ride in here and save us from this. And I would argue that the Tea Party, as it arose out of the ACA, well, where was that charismatic leader? It was John Boehner and Mitch McConnell and a whole bunch of angry folks at town halls that had members of Congress like myself answering questions. So when people are looking around, where's the leaders or whatever, they are going to organically step up. And what I said, our job is of people who do have power to enact things, we damn sure better be doing it. Yeah. And we better be out there standing alongside them.
So what? Does the Democratic Party have a leader? What kind of answer was that?
Well, I mean, it was evasive and honest, and also saying that it's okay not to have someone, which I kind of embrace. The fact that the Democrats don't have a particular leader right now, or somebody who they're going to ride into the next election, that's not what this is about. They have to have the people that they get behind. So they could have a lot of deputies without a sheriff. And I think that's, you know, the approach that Walz is taking to answering that question. I don't think he was prepared for it, but it doesn't matter. I think he answered it honestly. And there are a lot of people that are eager for the Democrats to have a response, and often you need a response with a leader. Look at movements, right? The civil rights movement those tendencies were always there, but then they got the leadership they needed in Martin Luther King and John Lewis and Julian Bond and people like that. And you can bring it down to small things like a political party. You can bring it back to Black Lives Matter. Even what happened to that movement? They didn't have a leader. So the Democrats will find their leader, but they have to get their message down first, and they have to get their strategy down first. And most likely a leader will arise or be sort of anointed by or several of them, and then we'll figure it out. But right now, it is incumbent upon them to do what they can to get their message across, and that's what they're having a problem doing, because they are sort of striated for the first time in a while. They have, you know, they've always had the progressives, the sort of moderates, and then the kind of in the middle establishments in their party. Now they really are looking for a bit more populism, and they're not getting that from everyone in their party. And so if they fracture, this would be the time to fracture, because they already don't have power, and they're not surrendering a ton of power. But if the Democrats find that they are united against one thing or in favor of one thing, which I would recommend if I were there to support and to hold up contrasts. During the fight for healthcare and Obamacare, the Republicans all they were was against Obamacare. They wanted to repeal it. They wanted to end it. They voted to repeal it several dozen times, but they didn't have an alternative. So the Democrats, aside from being upset with Trump, which a lot of people are, they need alternatives. They need legislative alternatives, and they need also personality and charisma behind those alternatives.
I'm reminded of Trump, who ran for the 4 years before he was elected recently. I mean, it seems like almost like he never really left the public eye. He used every, ounce of media attention that he could get during those 4 years. So if the Democratic Party doesn't have a leader, isn't it giving up?
No, I don't think so at all, Kim. I think that he's unique. His ability to do that is unique in American history. So I don't, for a president, I mean, I don't know what Grover Cleveland did while Benjamin Harrison was president before he ran again, but I do know that there's the ability to get on camera, to hold rallies, and to have people that were his devotees behind a cause that says he was wronged in 2016. I'm sorry, in 2020. He had that unique position to be able to do that. So he's taken up the oxygen. He will have taken up the oxygen for 15 years, almost of American politics, which is an amazing thing. But I wouldn't hold that against the Democrats. I wouldn't compare it, because there's no real copy to that. There's no analog to it. So I just think the Democrats have to do what they weren't doing, which is messaging. I think I said on this show or another show I did this week, is that I spoke to a member of Congress who said, we're winning the argument but losing the elections. And I said, you're not winning the argument if you're losing the elections. And they're not making a cogent argument. There are a lot of people that are in a hurry. They're saying, we got to do this now. We got to do this now. The truth is you don't. You have to see what happens with this budget resolution. You have to see, the fumbling by the Trump administration, and then you can put forward some alternatives. But right now they don't have any muscle legislatively to do that.
Spencer Jaffe on who should lead the Democratic Party with a $10 super chat. He says the leader is Newsom, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer. I don't think the country is ready for a Gavin Newsom. It seems, and I don't know if you think that this is one of the reasons that Kamala Harris wasn't successful, but I don't necessarily think the rest of the country looks at California and says, let's pick somebody from that state.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that they say that. We used to say that about Boston, and then you got Mike Dukakis, then you got John Kerry in the wake of people thinking it was too liberal there. I think it's about personalities, and I think it's about message. And I think that once they labeled, I don't think Kamala Harris lost because she was a Californian. I think she lost because for a variety of reasons, one of which was that they underestimated Trump a little bit, but also because she was a woman, unfortunately. And the electorate right now, the white male electorate wasn't sticking with that for the most part. And we're seeing that in numbers that came out. And also black male electorate was fraying on the edges and going to the other side. I also think labeling, I think the most powerful political ad I've seen in a long time was Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you, right? And so in a nutshell, that's why Kamala Harris lost, because of the labeling of the other side. And even though wokeism is not really definable, and they never defined it on the other side, and they still don't, that word really repels a lot of people for voting for Democrats. So I'm not saying that I think that Gavin Newsom can win, or that I agree with Spencer Jaffe there. I think the default is that a governor and a successful governor would be a good option, but someone who can message is more important, and that message has to be heard, right? Will people listen to Gavin Newsom? I don't know, but they have in this state for a while, and whether he can, captivate the rest of the country, that remains to be seen. I know why people have misgivings about him. There are issues also with other governors too. Josh Shapiro may not have as many. So yeah, there are voices there, but it's not about the person just yet. It's really about the message, and then it becomes about the person.
I also, the more time, I'm thinking back to the last question I asked you, the more time that a leader emerges and is, available, the more time there is to slap that person down and beat that person up. There's something to be said for, the traditional timing of a campaign as well.
There's no question you're right about that. I mean, I don't think that anyone needs to be anointed now, and nobody should announce that they're running for president yet. I mean, not just for the party, but for themselves, because there is too much time. And we talked about war fatigue in Ukraine. We do get person fatigue in this country, and I think that we Donald Trump again defying that norm, and the presidency. Within a presidency, you get fatigue, but usually things are over by then, and the power of incumbency is hard to beat. So, but I do think that there's something, that you're right about that going into this next period, it's not about capitalizing on who your person is going to be. For them, it's important to be raising money and staying current, but I don't think that it's all about that at all. I don't think that finding that next person is right there. Also, it can come organically if there's an issue. I mean, look, you look at the U.S. Senate right now, and there are people in that U.S. Senate speaking out in ways that they haven't before. They can only do so much as a minority senator, but you have Brian Schatz of Hawaii, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, all speaking out. Am I frozen now?
Your video is, but we can hear your audio just fine.
Yeah, it looks like I was frozen.
Yeah.
But they're all speaking out in ways that they hadn't before, and so around that, it creates a little bit of momentum very often, and that's how people find these voices. It's how they found Jimmy Carter. It's how they found, to a certain extent, Jimmy Carter as well. Mike Dukakis as well, and so I think that has to happen in a way as well.
Let's move to the Oval Office, where, I mean, there's a difference between respecting a president and having to kiss a president's butt. And that seems kind of how it's going with how you have to approach Trump in order to, get a favorable answer or any answer at all. And we have video of a reporter asking Trump a question in the Oval Office. And then he starts talking about reporters that he doesn't like. And he says they should resign. Anyone basically who doesn't agree with Trump or who speaks out against him in any way apparently needs to just quit their job. Here he is.
The good news is very few people watch them anymore. They have lost such credibility. And frankly, what Nicole Wallace said, I've never been a fan of hers, and she's not very talented. But I'll tell you, what she said the other day about that young man is disgraceful. She should be forced to resign. And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway. I don't know if it's not possible they pay her as much money as I hear, but certainly she's lost all credibility, both of them. But what they said the other day, they should be forced to resign about that young person.
Forced to resign.
Who was suffering great.
And so we know now also there are allegations that the man that asked Vladimir Zelensky about why he wasn't wearing a suit to the White House was allegedly paid by the Trump administration, the man who is dating Marjorie Taylor Greene. Are we down to state media or bribing the alleged reporters in the room to ask questions that are tilted toward Trump? And how unpresidential that he would call out journalists or commentators instead of just focusing on what America needs to focus on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to talk about Brian Darl, I mean, like that, like Brian Glenn is a clown. He's not a journalist. Mm-hmm. He's at One America News. He's dating Marjorie Taylor Greene. He has been handpicked by Trump at different times throughout the first term to ask questions. And yeah, I mean, one of the most disturbing things, and we've talked about it before, is what Trump and his administration are doing to control the media. And by doing whatever it is that they're doing to control the media, they're picking who disseminates the message, so that very few people I mean, that case notwithstanding, because it did get a lot of play. But it's when you're calling on Brian Glenn to do that, that's what you're going to get, and that is the blueprint for how they want this their message put out into public through people like that, and to goad other people. And so while he had to endure Jim Acosta's questions and Caitlin Collins' questions in his first administration, that's what he says, and while he can pick on Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow, the point is that he is selecting he is controlling the media. He's taking the fourth estate away. And that's a really one of the scariest things that's going on now, not talked about as much because it's not the same as what Doge is doing and closing the Department of Education, but it has an effect that is chilling and enduring possibly, and that's a problem.
Matt is showing us pictures of Trump wearing a crown, and there's a court ruling that came out yesterday, the day before, about Trump's firing of the labor board official being illegal, and the judge said a president is not a king, and with that ordered the reinstatement of this woman named Gwen Wilcox to the National Labor Relations Board after Trump had her removed. Some of these rulings, of course, will be appealed, but some of these rulings are coming down not in Trump's favor.
Yeah, that's right. And we're seeing the behavior of the court being very deferential to the federal court system and the lower courts. You're seeing it from the Chief Justice. You saw it from Amy Coney Barrett. You need more than you do need two of those conservative justices to come over for every ruling now to make it 5-4. But we've seen it now, and what this tells me, not on substance, but just sort of on deference. And again, this is a temporary ruling. This is not a permanent ruling that we got about that. But you're seeing the courts say, the federal courts we don't need to step in every time someone is rankled or every time the administration wants something. We don't need to step in to overturn something that was done in the court system that we respect so much. So to that end, that's one, crumb of encouragement.
Yeah. I wonder if we can take you out and put you back in again so that we can see your picture. But I want to ask you, there you go. I want to ask you about Doge. And there's been all kinds of hoopla about who's really in charge of Doge, trying to get Musk off of the legal hook in case lawsuits come his way. And so yesterday, President Trump said he'd like cabinet secretaries to take charge of cutting spending in their departments and firing people instead of Doge. And the headline is that the president is putting Doge on a leash. Is that lip service because of the fear of lawsuits, or is Musk being scaled back a little bit?
That remains to be seen, and I think that he kind of muddies the water here, does the president? And I think in protection of Musk and those legal problems that you mentioned just a bit ago. So it's hard to really know what's true there, but that he has his fingerprints on everything that happens with Doge right now. The president does, and so does Musk, because this is his baby and this is what he talks about all the time now. So until otherwise, for legal reasons, I think that it's probably about protection. I don't know enough, Kim, about what is going on, but I also don't think Trump does. So I think that it's muddied waters here.
There's a story that Trump is revoking student visas for pro-Hamas social media posts. Anybody who posts on social media, anything pro-Hamas, if it's flagged by AI and you're in America on a student visa, they send you home.
Yeah, that is what people are saying, not only now, but I think they're going back and combing through people's social media to see if they've said anything that is pro-Hamas or anti-Israel. I believe it.
It feels anti-American to me.
Of course it does. It is.
Here we are. We're able to have our own opinion about whatever we want to think. That's what makes America amazing, is that you and I can have vastly different opinions. And I know the people aren't citizens that are coming here, but while they're here, they should be able to, at least in America and with our laws, not be subject to being kicked out of the country for what they think.
Yeah, of course. And it's also so hypocritical when they are saying that their free speech on the right has been muted. And this is obviously free speech. You cannot be penalized for anything you say that isn't threatening, right? Or that isn't menacing. And so if you support Hamas or you support Israel, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to have an opinion in this country. That's one of the beauties of having free speech. And to punish students, and we don't know instances and examples of this yet, but we will. And once we hear those, we're going to know all about them. And I think there's unquestionably going to be a problem with this if in fact it continues to go on.
According to The Guardian, the AI-fueled catch and revoke effort includes AI-assisted reviews of tens of thousands of student visa holders' social media accounts. They will be checking news reports of previous demonstrations against Israel's policies and Jewish students' lawsuits highlighting foreign nationals allegedly engaging in anti-Semitism. So this is, I guess, this is who we are now?
Well, saying what anti-Semitism is, you can be anti-Israel and pro-Semite, and I think that is, one of the nuances that would probably be employed here. But regardless, it goes to free speech. Whatever you say, however much you may loathe Hamas, if somebody supports Hamas, that doesn't mean they lose their student visa or can't express that in this country. As terrible as that is, people have supported the Ku Klux Klan. People support, and we protect that with our First Amendment. And so,
yeah, you can be the biggest anti-Semite there is, and I may despise you for it, but this is America. You have a right to be it. You don't have the right to be free of the consequences from it. If you harm someone, or if your employer knows that and they don't want you to be speaking for them and they fire you, well, that's the consequences. But you can be the biggest jerk in the world.
Yeah, no question. I mean, that's the thing. So I think, and we've, it's why we protect things like porn, right? I mean, there is that famous, I think it was Potter. No, it wasn't Potter Stewart. It was someone in the chat will probably remember which justice wrote that beautiful. It's just not coming to me right now. About knowing what.
No, when I see it, yeah.
I know when I see
what
it.
What is obscene?
Yeah, Lewis Sullivan. I don't remember who it was, but in case. I mean, so it doesn't matter, but it's the point is that we protect some awful stuff here with the First Amendment, and but we do it, and we have to be consistent about it. And it seems very pointed and very subjective.
I haven't thrown trade at you yet, but we're going back and forth and back and forth. One day we're having these tariffs go into effect. One day we're not. Now we're putting a 250% tariff on dairy from Canada. Tomorrow we won't. When it will go into effect? It's like we're in this tariff limbo dance.
Yeah, and I think that's how he governs, right? I mean, he probably got calls when the market went down. Whoa! I'm losing all my money, and it's like, oh, rich guy losing money. We better extend these tariffs or revisit them or give a 1 month, which they gave. There is such a, there's governance by whim that happens with Trump and his administration. We saw that in the first 4 years, and we're seeing it now. And what is it? He goes before Congress and tells them all the things he wants to do with tariffs, and then the next day the markets plummet and he changes his mind. It's really about which way the wind blows on things. But tariffs seem to be a big part of his economic program. And now people are starting to see that tariffs are not easy. And he presumed also that the agrarian economy, that farmers would be backing him and all in on this, even though it was going to hurt them initially. They're saying no. A lot of them are saying no, that's not the case anymore because the cost of things is too high. We could have done it when the cost of living and the price of gas and other things were lower, but now the cost of living is too high, and we can't take temporary hits like that. They're too devastating for us and for our workforce.
Last thing I wanted to mention before we get to your sports report.
Wait, we
is,
got no, or unless you're going here now, no State of the Union stuff, huh?
Oh, do you want to talk about the speech? Let's
No,
talk
no,
about
I don't.
it.
I mean, we don't. I didn't. I thought that was. I assume we'd be going there.
No,
But
I don't.
it's
I
fine.
didn't.
It's
It happened so many
talked out
days
on it.
ago that I don't have it. Although I know this is a weekend review. I was going to ask you about the new Bitcoin reserve, but let's roll back a couple days to that speech, which wasn't really a State of the Union address per
It
se,
wasn't,
but it
no.
kind of was. It's just like what the first couple of months in office. Let's talk about all the stuff I did.
Well, yeah, there are different kinds of presidential addresses. One where the
Mhm.
president asks to address Congress, and one where he's invited. I actually went into this one thinking it was the president asked to address a joint session, but it was the speaker inviting him to address Congress. So, makes it a little more State of the Union-y than were he to have said, "I need to come and talk to the people."
Mhm.
But nonetheless, it was it showed a lot about sort of where we are in politics right now. So the meat of the speech was less important to me than was seeing how Democrats were trying to piece together, and which Democrats were trying to piece together whatever message and response they wanted to do. Some of it playful, some of it, you could say amateurish, some of it serious, and some of it like Representative Al Green, just really committed to what he believes, and knowing that he should have gotten censured for what he did, but still saying it and say he would do it again. So respecting the institution, but at the same time saying that we've got to talk about what they're not talking about here. And so I thought it was interesting from a political standpoint, but it certainly, it doesn't define the Democrats. What Al Green did defines Al Green, and what those members of Congress did, it wasn't unanimous. If there was something unanimous by everyone, say boycotting, that would have said, we don't care what they say. And there's it's a little bit different, a little bit, maybe perhaps a bit more nuanced, but nonetheless, it was interesting on that score alone, just to see how the Democrats are starting to play to Trump.
Were you surprised to hear that 10 Democrats sided with Republicans in Congressman Green's censure?
No, I wasn't. I mean, the House has rules, and without them, first of all, it helped Al Green because it got him noticed more. And if there were no rules that the House has for things like censure, for speaking up, for engaging in personality, they call it, then Al Green wouldn't have been noticed, because this thing would happen every time somebody stepped into the well of the House. So because those rules exist, we got to hear Al Green disrupt, and it made a difference, for whatever difference it made. The other side of it is there's consistency. Jim Himes was one of those members of Congress, a Democrat from Connecticut, who said, look, when Joe Wilson screamed at Barack Obama, "You lie," in the middle of the State of the Union, I voted for his censure. So I'm going to vote for Al Green's censure. And Al Green, for his part, said, I understand why they're voting for my censure. I'm willing to suffer the consequences here. I just needed to get my message across. So I don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, there are people who are saying, "Oh, you got to primary them. No, they're not talking about Al Green's message. They're talking about consistency in many cases. This is not an issue where, like, oh, I'm in a purple district, like people are going to say. He didn't censure Al Green when the election happened a year from November. I don't buy that,
All right, let's move on to Michael Shure's 48 Seconds of Sports, because the NHL trade deadline is today.
That's, it is today, and it's exciting. And I guess Albert's not with us today.
No, he is not. It doesn't mean, though, that we're not going to hockey it up.
I appreciate it. His San Jose Sharks were very active. I mean, the playoffs essentially start now. A lot of huge names moving in hockey, which is terribly exciting. And I think that when you see some of these trades, and you see what the Sharks did, trading away, sort of building for next year and beyond, and you see a guy like Brad Marchand moved from Boston to Florida at the deadline. My Rangers made a couple of moves, which are, they were minor moves, I think. But they got, they've been working all the way along here. But it's exciting. There's nothing like a trade deadline because hockey trades happen so often. It's not like the football trade deadline. I think basketball and hockey have really good trade deadlines. And it ended at noon before I came on the air here, and very, very exciting. And now it's probably 48 seconds.
And now probably 48 seconds. Michael Shure, thank you for coming on the show. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next
too.
Friday.
We'll see you next Friday.
I appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye. Michael Shure, everybody, coming on, talking politics with us. Michael Shure, a journalist who, of course, knows more about politics than most of us will ever. He will forget more about politics than most of us will ever know. I should pay more attention. All right, we'll move on because we're going to the big movies. We have Michael Snyder to talk about movies, streaming options, all kinds of things. The Culture Blaster joins us now. He comes and he goes on a rainbow. It is Michael.
Hey.
I just can kind of hear you. Let's pump his volume up just a little bit. Hi, Michael.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me now, as the people say?
Yes, I can hear you a little bit better. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. And it's been quite a week since we last spoke on the Mark Thompson Show. We've had the Oscars. I have a few post-Oscar thoughts, if you don't mind. I thought it might be relevant. Do you care? Are you interested?
Yeah, please.
Well, it was show business as usual, and award ceremonies in the arts are going to forever be bloated, self-congratulatory affairs. But, I enjoyed watching it this year, despite my disdain, my innate disdain for this sort of thing. Speaking of innate, my adoration of Anora, filmmaker Sean Baker, and his lead actress Mikey Madison was reinforced by all the awards. I mean, I personally loved The Brutalist and A Complete Unknown and a few other movies, but I was happy to see an independent film recognized and a director who's made nothing but great work on a shoestring for the past, 6, 7, 8 years get that kind of acknowledgement. And she, to my mind, came out of nowhere, but apparently she's been doing work. She was in Pamela Adlin's Better Things sitcom as one of her daughters. Whatever she did prior, Mikey Madison really kicked ass. She's a star. Conan O'Brien was a good host. I mean, he's the master of dry, self-deprecating wit. He's kind of amusing in a low-key way. I don't often find him gut-bustingly funny, but he was the right tone for the Oscars. If I had a betting pool to pick the winners, I would have made some serious cash, Kim. I mean, there was no pool where I was partying to watch the Oscars, or I would have walked out of there certainly wealthier. And I have to say, after that James Bond dance number, I'm kind of afraid that Amazon, who controls the Bond franchise now, is going to come up with 007 the musical. I'm seriously afraid about this. I don't know if you're, you feel the same way.
I don't necessarily want to see that in a musical. Your sound is kind of crackly. I don't know if it would make sense to have you rejoin the show or not. But
that's fine. But you want to do that?
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of a crackle going on. Let's try it. Let's take you out and let's bring you back in as you reconnect there. Yeah, getting a lot of comments in the chat about Snyder's audio breaking up. And so we know we want to hear what he has to say about movies and about streaming. So let's see if we can't get that a little bit better. Luis says, Michael, the Rangers are in the playoff hunt. Is there anything they can do at the trade deadline to improve their odds? Luis, thank you for the $5 super sticker. And I'm sorry I didn't see it while Michael Shure was here, but I'll forward him the question and then I'll get back to you by email. How's that? Michael Snyder, let's see if your connection is better this time.
I don't know. We're seemingly having all sorts of technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think we'll have to just make do with it. It's a little crackly, but that's all right. Your volume is good, so we'll take it. All right.
Anyway, just to wrap up, it was the Oscars. I thought the yellow hat and a monkey to complete his look, right?
I missed that. You actually cut out there for just a moment.
Wow. technical difficulties. I was just saying that Chalamet looked like the man in the yellow hat from the Curious George movies.
He did. I'm reminded of Adam Sandler, who yelled Chalamet at the end.
Yeah, that was cute. Anyway, this past week was also Mardi Gras, and tonight in Los Angeles, I'm back in LA. There's a big group art show at La Luz de Jesus built around kawaii, which is a Japanese word that designates cuteness, and all of the art is inspired by Japanese manga, anime, and toy and advertising mascots. And I'm kind of excited about that. So I just wanted to bring that up. And, it's nice to be back in Los Angeles, the entertainment capital. And we've got movies to review. What do you say?
We do. I just did a story during news for you about this whole Mickey 17, and I guess it's doing really well in previews. I think it's going to bring in $18 to $20 million this weekend and knock a bunch of other movies off the top of the block.
Well, you forced me to address that movie first, Kim, by bringing it up, and I'm happy to do it. That was my intent. Korean director Bong Joon-ho, right? Have you seen his movies at all?
No,
Yes, you have. You must have. Bong Joon-ho has established himself as one of the greats with movies that they're thrilling, they're amusing, they deliver incisive and often scathing cultural commentary. And he's the guy who made Parasite, the Oscar-winning, class-conscious, slow-rolling home invasion satire set in an upscale Korean home. I mean, that brought him so much acclaim, but he had already delivered a great serial killer crime flick, Memories of Murder, the funny but exciting monster attack soul science fiction film, The Host, Okja, which you can watch on Netflix, where a kid befriends a misunderstood beast. And he did Snowpiercer, the apocalyptic English language adventure on a careening train that also spawned a great American TV show of the same name. With Mickey 17, I think he delivers one of his freakiest and most accomplished movies to date. It's a satirical science fiction comedy, which is an adaptation of author Edward Ashton's 2022 novel, Mickey 7. I guess Bong wanted to add 10 to the 7, so we got Mickey. This is about a young man in deep debt who is being pursued by deadly thugs in the employ of a loan shark who wants to get paid back. So he's desperate to make money. And thus, Mickey signs up to be part of a space expedition headed by a kind of cult leader and his conniving wife. And the intent is to colonize a distant planet with their followers. In order to get the gig, this guy, Mickey Barnes, agrees to be a participant in the Expendables program. Now, this has nothing to do with the Expendables movies, thank God. Anyway, Mickey is cloned and tasked with all the really dangerous jobs on the mission. And when the clone inevitably dies from radiation poisoning, from working on the outside of the spaceship, or worse, another Mickey is cloned in his place with most of his memories downloaded into his new brain. But after the space ark lands on this treacherous ice planet, Mickey is sent on a mission, seems to die at the tendrils and the claws of the dominant native life form. So back at colony headquarters, a new Mickey is cloned, but the previous Mickey, the 17th, since apparently, like I said, Bong wanted to play with more clones than the book, survives. A personality crisis is inevitable, not to mention more overt conflict, since both Mickeys are in love with the same woman, and the colonists only allow one clone per body to be alive, and they'll simply destroy the oldest. So there's kind of a ticking clock. There's sort of a chase. There's, which Mickey is which. All of the Mickeys are brilliantly and distinctly played by a virtually unrecognizable Robert Pattinson. I mean, as soon as he's on screen, this is the central figure, but he doesn't say Robert Pattinson, this is the guy who was Batman in the recent movie. He was in the Twilight movies. He is aided by a seamless display of the very best computer-generated special effects that technology has to offer. You will believe the multiples are real and they're in scene. And as for the rest of the cast, you got the great Stephen Ewan from Minara and The Walking Dead. He plays Mickey's frenemy. Naomi Aki plays Nasha, the woman Mickey loves, and who loves some version of him. We're really not sure witch, and a brilliant double act as the husband and wife cult leaders, Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. They are absolutely great. Mark Ruffalo knocked me out in this thing as this sort of Jim Jones in space type. Now, on its surface, this thing is kind of a rollicking interstellar space opera, but the real meat of Mickey 17 is the morality of cloning, the blurring of religion and politics, the legitimacy and cruelty of colonization, and the evils of genocide. They're all touched on here amid all the action, the humor, and the speculative science. Is it my favorite Bong Joon-ho movie? I think it might be the most fun, and it's certainly as good as you can get from this guy, and it burnishes his credit as one of the most significant filmmakers in modern cinema. Mickey 17 is in theaters.
And you're recommending it?
Yeah. I mean, it gets crazy. I don't know that it's like your cup of tea, but man, it was good. Now,
well, it seems like one of those movies where it's like, okay, which one is which? Who is who? Who is, which one is that? Is it really him? Is it really not him?
No. You know which Mickey is which.
Okay.
Especially when some certain aspects of the story play out. You absolutely know. It's other people in the colony who are kind of unsure, which is which when it's finally revealed that there are two of them.
Right.
Anyway, let's move on. We got a couple more films. The Rules of Jenny Penn is a really creepy horror movie that boasts a double act by two of the greatest actors working today. And those actors are John Lithgow and Jeffrey Rush. These guys are beyond compare. They're wonderful. So Rush plays a judge named Stephen Mortensen. And while on the bench, he suffers a near fatal stroke. And so he has to be put in a care facility. And this care facility caters to infirm and elderly people, some with mental disabilities, some with physical disabilities. There's a former rugby star who ends up being the roommate to the judge in his, care facility bedroom. And there's also kind of a wild card, a guy named Dave Creedy who has a little puppet, a hand puppet that he calls Jenny Penn. This is the guy played by Lithgow. And this sort of gentle exterior masks a complete and utter psycho who torments all the other people in the care facility and decides to target both the judge and this rugby star, this retired rugby star. And it starts as kind of games, that Dave Creedy and his puppet are playing, and it gets really, really intense over the course of the film. And again, the chance to see these two actors, Lithgow and Rush, face off against one another in this kind of messed up circumstance, and the way things get more and more dangerous and deadly. And, who are the nurses going to believe? Who are the doctors going to believe? The guy that's been there for a long time, who's seemingly a lovable clown with a puppet, or this, judge who's angry, who's furious at what's being done to him? It's pretty powerful. James Ashcroft is the director. I think he, co-wrote this thing with a guy named Eli Kent. In fact, I'm sure of it. And it's one of those down under horror treats that seems to come to us like once a year or so. I thought it was really well done. And if you like horror movies, this is going to be your cup of blood. The Rule of Jenny Penn. It's not terribly bloody, so I wouldn't worry about that, Kim. It's just that sort of menace, that sense of unease that develops over the course of a really well-made film that trades in dread, and that's the Rule of Jenny Penn.
Why is it that doll faces are so creepy?
I don't know, but talk to Annabelle about that, will you? Check in with.
While you're talking, I'm looking at the movie poster, and it's just, ugh.
Yeah, well, Jenny Penn isn't the most pleasant puppet you've ever seen. Certainly not in the hands of this guy, Dave Creely, played by John Lithgow. The movie is in select theaters, and I think it's going to play well on video. It's a Shudder film, so I think the Shudder streaming service will probably be presenting it at some point soon. So you can be on the lookout for that if the movie isn't opening in theaters in your neck of the woods. Streaming on Amazon starting today is a rom-com that I found pleasant and sort of sweet and pretty smart, and with kind of an appealing cast and a little bit of cross-cultural frisson. It's called Picture This, and it is about a photographer named Pia, of Indian or Pakistani background. I really wasn't clear, but it's from the Indian subcontinent. Her predecessors, her ancestors, and she's a pretty modern girl. She's played by Simone Ashley, who apparently is well loved from Bridgerton, the TV serial that kind of modernizes, I guess, the aristocratic period movie style that we've come to expect from the Brits. And she's had a long-time boyfriend that kind of done her dirty. And so she's been on the outs with this guy. He's played by Hero Fiennes Tiffin, who, by the way, is the nephew of Ralph Fiennes, the actor, and was tapped to play the young version of Voldemort in the Harry Potter movies. He's grown up.
Oh, that's cool.
He plays opposite Simone Ashley, and she has her gay best friend, and they run her portrait studio, and she's trying to make a go of it as a photographer, and she's struggling financially. And her little sister is about to get married. Now, Pia does not want to get married. She has no interest in having kids. Mom, on the other hand, is traditional enough that she would like her daughters to, tie the knot. And she also has a cache of jewelry that she's been saving to give them. And that jewelry could help Pia pay off her loans and debts and get her photography studio up and running. But of course, she's opposed to, getting married. And so there's a little struggle there. So her mother and sister say, prior to the sister's wedding, we're going to suggest 5 people you can go on dates with, and of them, choose somebody, get married, and hopefully it'll be someone who can help you finance your photography business. It sounds pretty crass, but it's actually pretty cute. And the supporting players are all pretty good. Not necessarily familiar to American audiences, but familiar to some British TV viewers and film goers, I'm sure. And it's kind of sweet. And it's directed by Prarthana Mohan and the screenwriter Nikita Lawani, both of whom come from the background of Pia's family. And I think they bring a little bit of the verity to it. And you do get the Bollywood vibe occasionally. And you do get, the wedding ceremonies. They're always so elaborate. And I guess from that standpoint, it looks a little familiar, especially, there have been movies that have come down the pike that have dealt with this sort of thing before. But I thought it was okay. I give it a tentative okay. And it's got the convenience. It's got the convenience of being on Amazon Prime Video. You can start streaming it now. I think that's about all we should really deal with movie-wise this weekend.
All right. What else you got?
Well, I love my superheroes. I love the Marvel and DC stuff. Mark always makes a sly reference to that when he introduces me. Yeah. And I am comic book boy, not comic book guy. I'm comic book boy. Okay, get it straight.
Gotcha.
And Daredevil, which was a mini series that ran on Netflix and was one of Marvel's first television projects since starting this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and tied into the movies to an extent, but were pretty much their own thing. Daredevil was on Netflix. It ran for 3 seasons. It was terrific, gritty, inner city New York action with a guy who had enhanced senses, blinded as a young man, but it also enhanced his other abilities, and physically a marvel. And he's very heroic and a little conflicted, a Catholic kid. He doesn't want to kill, but he wants to fight crime. He wants to do what's right. So that show ended after 3 seasons on Netflix, along with a few other Netflix-related, Marvel-related shows like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. And as they've, taken command of the properties that they had sold to Fox and Sony, Marvel has kind of decided to work the Netflix characters into their overall universe, but do it in a way that would be true to the nature of the shows. Thus, Daredevil Born Again, which kind of picks up where the last show ended, and still features the conflict between blind lawyer and vigilante Matt Murdock, Daredevil, and his greatest opponent, the kingpin of crime, Wilson Fisk. And Charlie Cox as Murdoch is back. And Vincent D'Onofrio is back as the massive and imposing villain who has a very tragic backstory, I might add, Wilson Fisk. Only now, Fisk has tried to pull his criminal behavior out of the public eye and run for office. A felon running for office. And he wants to be a mayor of New York City. Could it actually happen? Could a felon get elected to an important position like the mayor of New York? Anyway, my point being, both actors are back. Also, we have a couple of supporting actors from the previous series. His partners at the law firm, Eldon Hansen playing Foggy Nelson, and the lovely and charming Deborah Ann Wall as Karen Page. They're back in the first episode, and Fisk is running for mayor, and it's going to be trouble. And I'm totally blown away by the first couple episodes, which aired this past week, and I highly recommend fans of the original series Daredevil to jump on this one, which is available on Disney Plus. They have, I believe, 18 episodes lined up, and highly recommended. Daredevil Born Again.
So sometimes I think when things are on Disney Plus, and I know this isn't always the case because they have, ratings and everything, but it seems like maybe they're child friendly. Would you call this one child friendly?
Absolutely not. They made a big point of saying, if we're doing this, we have to be true to the nature, the gritty, crime-riddled, violence-driven nature of the original series and the character. And they did a really good job of it so far. Nothing is gratuitous. It's all in the context of the story. And there are great martial arts sequences that I think real top-notch fight choreographers have overseen. That's been the case for most of these Charlie Cox Daredevil shows. The episodes invariably have, a little bit of that action, and they do a beautiful job of it. I also want to just quickly mention The White Lotus, which is back for series 3. I love this show, created by screenwriter, director Mike White, who so far has helmed every episode, written and directed them all. And this is basically, it pulls a kind of cast of familiar actors together and sends them for the same vacation time at an exotic resort. They've been to 2 of them so far. The third of the exotic resorts is in Thailand. And I know that Jennifer Coolidge made hay in the first 2 White Lotus series, but she's not here. And instead, we have a very starry cast: Carrie Coon, Leslie Bibb, Michelle Monaghan, Walton Goggins, various others, Jason Isaacs, Parker Posey, and Jason Isaacs play husband and wife from the South. He's a businessman. She's kind of a socialite, and they have 2 kids, one of whom is kind of an a-hole, a guy who thinks the world is his oyster. The other is the spiritual girl who's looking for, guru and spiritual advice while she's going to be in the Thailand resort. And man, these shows are great. They really are. I love them. And kudos to everybody involved. I'm caught up in the current season. They drop on Sundays via HBO, and also I think you can catch them on Max as well.
Okay, The White Lotus. I hadn't started season 3 yet, so good to hear your take on that. You want to do anything else, or should we recap it?
I do want to suggest that if people want to read about 2 shows that involve ex-presidents, and we've already talked about one of them, that being 0 Day. I did a column in the current run of The Voice of San Francisco at thevoicesf.org that discusses both 0 Day and Paradise, which is a very, very different take on presidential power, and one particular ex-president played by James Marsden. It's a pretty wonderful show, and it features a terrific actor, Sterling K. Brown, as a Secret Service agent who is tasked with watching the president, and something unexpected happens, and the president has seemed to retire to a very sylvan, like small town, one of those kind of suburban, friendly, hi, your neighbors, etc. He's in a a mansion in this town, but what you see is not really what's going on. The initial sense of what's happened and his retirement, kind of a false flag. And man, it gets wilder and wilder. Paradise is on Hulu.
Oh, wow. That's on my list. So I'll picture this on my list from Michael Snyder and Paradise as well. All right, let's recap it. You said of Mickey 17, it talks about the morality of cloning, questions about religion and politics. You said it's a fun movie and it gets crazy and you recommend it. As for Picture This, it's a rom-com on Prime. You called it cute, sweet, bit of a Bollywood vibe, and you said it's okay. The Rule of Jenny Penn. It's a horror treat. You said it's well done. If you like horror movies, it's more menacing and less bloody. You recommend it. Then you moved over to TV and you said the Daredevil series on Disney Plus, not for kids, has a bunch of returning actors and you were blown away by it. You talked about The White Lotus season 3. You said yes to this. They go to Thailand and you love it. You're caught up in season 3. You said the new episodes drop on Sunday. And as for Paradise, you say it's wild and worth the trip. It is on Hulu. The streaming, is it a series? Paradise.
Yeah, that pretty much says it. I mean, if you want to see two great actors going at it, I mean, Jeffrey Rush and John Lithgow in The Rule of Jenny Penn should be on your list. But again, it's horror. I know that some people shrink from that genre.
Always find Michael Snyder at thevoicesf.org, where you can find his writings. He's a great writer. You can tell by the way he speaks and his amazing vocabulary. There were at least, I'm going to say, 10 ding words, but I don't have the dinger because Mark's not here. There you go. There you have it.
Great. Really? Was that necessary?
I guess it was.
That's the meta ding for everything I said.
A couple of comments. Luis would like you to know, Michael, that if you're a fan, there's a 9 Inch Nails exhibit in Hollywood through the weekend. So there's that.
Man,
And
I've got all the albums, Luis. I'm good.
Phineas would like you to talk about Reacher, the series. I don't know if you've watched Reacher, but he keeps talking about it. So
not only have I watched it, but I did a thing on it a couple of weeks ago. Come on now, Phineas. We love Reacher. Reacher's in series 3. It looks a little better than the second one, and as ever, Alan Ritchson is the perfect embodiment of taciturn strength and morality as Jack Reacher, the vagabond vigilante do-gooder. I love the guy.
Reacher it is. Thank you, Michael Snyder. He comes and goes on a rainbow. Thanks for being here. Bye, Michael Snyder. Yep, he would have said go Giants or go Sharks or go 49ers, but that's all right. Michael Snyder, everybody. Let's go to a couple of comments on the way out before we hit the after party live. Peter says Mr. Predicto is better at tariffs than Trump. Signs point to pick your own adventure. Thank you, Peter Newton, for the great comment and for the $5. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone who has contributed to the show. Find us at PayPal, Patreon. TheMarkThompsonShow.com is where you can find the links to all of it. Again, TheMarkThompsonShow.com. And thank you to everyone who's contributed via Super Chat and Super Sticker here on The Mark Thompson Show as well. All right, we can hit it. It's time for Shadow. For stopping by the show. Thank you. Huge thank you to Michael Snyder as well for stopping by the show. Matt, thank you for all your help today. I really appreciate it. Mark Thompson will be back on Monday. And as mentioned previously, he welcomes some guests, including we have Alex Lawson, who will talk about Social Security and Medicare. Gil Durant, former opinion editor for the Sacramento Bee and San Francisco Examiner, former governmental spokesperson. He'll be here talking politics, as well as Gary Dietrich. That all happens on Monday. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'll see you on the After Party Live. Thank you. If you haven't, click subscribe and click the like button on your way out here on The Mark Thompson Show. Please do so. And bye-bye.